little bit of housekeeping. And as everyone knows, I like to say my thank yous. So thank you to the team behind Ramadan FM, who without them, this would not be possible. And a huge thank you to all my listeners and viewers, and also the guests who participate and also who listen in and watch regularly, without whom, again, the show would not be possible. So as you know, my show is interactive, so you can telephone in, you can text message, you can WhatsApp, or you can even put a comment on Facebook. So if you are wanting to telephone the studio line, it's 0116 4822 I still don't know that number by heart, so apologies. And if you wanted to text or WhatsApp in, it's 077 488 55055. And again, search for Ramadan FM on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and so on, and you should be able to post a comment. So today's guest is Cluadia Webbe MP, who is now a resident of Leicester and Leicestershire, and she will give herself a little bit of an introduction and we'll go straight into what I always like to do. So, Assalamu alaikum and welcome, Cluadia.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for having me on your show. I'm very delighted to be here. Of course, Leicester is my home. It's the place where I was born, where I grew up, where I went to school, college, and even university. So this is absolutely brilliant to be representing the constituency of Leicester East. I'm very proud to represent my home city, very proud to represent this constituency and all of its diversity. And I'm really pleased to be here with you.
Well, thank you very much. I actually didn't know that you were born and bred in Leicester. My apologies. I thought you, I'd heard that you used to live in London.
Well, you know, the media spin and all of those that want to believe that Leicester isn't diverse, and it is diverse, will have you believe that. But the reality is, yes, this is my home city. It's where I was born, where both my parents are now sadly buried, and where my family live for generations. And so my parents actually came to Leicester from a place called Nevis, which is in the Caribbean, next to St. Kitts. So it's actually the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, but both my parents are from Nevis itself. And they met actually for the first time here in the UK, which is actually quite remarkable because Nevis is a place that at any one time has a population of just 11,000 people.
Wow.
So it's actually quite remarkable that they met here in the UK. And so I'm here, and we've just got, you know, just generations of families here. My father was with his identical twin brother, actually worked at Watkins on Green Lane, and had done so for years in the days when the manufacturing base was significant, and when, you know, you had a union. He didn't sadly acquire the living wage or the minimum wage as we know it now, but you know, they had a union, and those in those days the manufacturing base had unions and was like a family. I remember going to Watkins as for family events and days out and that sort of thing. But of course, we don't see those jobs for life anymore.
No.
And we are faced with precarious work, I think, in our constituency, which is sad for generations coming up now. And things are therefore have not improved, but in my opinion have gone somewhat backwards in terms of the way in which society now treats our new generation, our generations coming forward now. I grew up in poverty, and we're seeing levels of poverty now. It's not gone away. And so these are significant issues that need to be addressed.
Of course, I understand. I mean, I'm not born and bred in Leicester. I'm actually a northerner. I'm from Bolton. Mm-hmm. But I've lived in Leicester more than the lifetime that I spent in Bolton. So I do believe that Leicester is my residency. It's my hometown. I'm not sure how my family feel about that because, born and bred, raised up north for them. my hometown will always be Bolton.
Well, you're very welcome to Leicester. We are a city that welcomes everyone.
Absolutely.
And we are open and welcoming.
Absolutely. I mean, I ride a motorbike, so for me, constantly having those challenges and the way my life has been led and so on, there has been instances where Leicester has been more welcoming than, say, other areas. But equally, there have been parts of Leicester that haven't. But, that's going to happen in every hometown. Now, I did introduce you as Cluadia Webbe MP. Now, this whole show is about breaking stereotypes. So we're going to talk about the challenges that you had and the journeys and so on. So I'm going to try and take you just a little bit back in time. Now, you gave me a fantastic history about your parents, and that's really beautiful. When you were growing up, I'm assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm assuming that your parents were quite supportive of anything that you wanted to be. So was there a particular career or industry that you actually wanted to go in as you were growing up?
Well, we grew up through struggle and strife, and it wasn't easy. I'm a daughter of the Windrush generation, those that came in the 60s, late 50s, 60s, to see a better life, if you like, here in the UK. What they met with wasn't that better life. They met racism and hardship, and that is what my parents experienced as well. And so even though both parents were working, we grew up in relative poverty, in the sense that, when it came to sort of events like we've just had Easter pass by, and we've had events like Christmas pass by, our donations used to come from the local church. That is the extent of the poverty that we grew up in. So in a sense, my parents worked hard, but life was tough. And my parents were equally, they were strict as well as parents. And so those kinds of, the sort of aspirations that they had for me were limited to what I guess they felt or knew was available to somebody coming from my background and my culture. And so my mother actually wanted me to be a dressmaker. And she wanted me to work with her, because my mum was a dressmaker, and she excelled in that. But my mother was also deaf, hard of hearing, and she used to be able to sew clothes excellently and create garments without patterns. And our home was the place where people came for their Friday evening outfit, and my mum did more than that. She also did people's hair, and she dressed people, and she made sure that clothes were well fitted and well made. And so my home became that place where, people would roll up and they'd say that they'd want this sort of design and this sort of way. And my mother would make it, do some measurements, have some fittings, weeks they'd come back and do some fittings, then there'll be the final fit, and then it would be finished. So it was a constant flow of people in and out. And my mum wanted me to eventually, I think, help her. So at a very early age, I think I was 13, she sent me off to pattern cutting classes. So I thought, okay, I'll do this pattern cutting class. My mum wants me to kind of, do this. But it was very early for me to be able to be doing that sort of thing.
How old were you?
I was 13, 14, and I was doing my first pattern cutting class at that stage. She then sent me off to do a typewriting course, because she felt that I needed to have another option, just in case the first option didn't work out. So she made sure that I could type the old-fashioned way with the typewriter, and so I learned very quickly to type and do shorthand as well. So all of that I did before I was 16, and at the same time I was having to attend school and try to do well in school. And it was in those days where your schooling was determined by where you lived. And so the school that I wanted to go to was on the other side of the road. And when I found out I had to go to this particular school, which was King Richard's at the time, I was crying for days and weeks, because all my friends were going to the school on the other side. But the school that I was allocated was further away, but it was on the same side, and that's how they allocated schools at that time. And also, it was well known as a school that was quite damning in terms of racism. And so if you were a Caribbean child, an African child, or an Asian child, you were sure to gonna get, faced with blatant racism. And my parents I guess they didn't know how to challenge that process at the time. You just had to go where you were allocated, and it wasn't pleasant. So the thing about my mum being deaf, it meant also that she overcompensated from an early age. So she always made sure before we even started primary school that we could read and write. So before I started school, my mum was teaching me from the Ladybird books, Jane and Peter and all these sort of books, how to read and write. So I was doing that before I went to primary school. So without that, and without that input from my parents, I don't think I'd be able to be here now, because I don't believe that my school gave me much.
Now, you've given me a lot of information. I am going to ask you the same question again, because you've given me a lot of information about typewriting and pattern cutting, but you said that your mother was quite limited. And I appreciate that, but did you at any point ever think that, this typewriting isn't for me, this pattern cutting isn't for me, I want to be, a teacher or a motorbiker or anything?
Well, in reality, it wasn't that my mum was limited or my parents were limited. It's just that they gave me some skills for life that I didn't realize at the time would then hold me in good stead later on. So because some of these skills, when you do learn pattern cutting, you are learning mathematics like no other.
I know.
And so, I developed skills which took me beyond the aspirations that my parents had for me. Because once you've learnt these skills, you cannot go backwards. You are only going to go forward in terms of your aspirations. And so I began to excel in mathematics, and actually then did a mathematics degree, because that was what the school said I was good at. So I did that, and I still I didn't really know what I wanted to be. They suggest, there was a suggestion about becoming an auctoress. What is an auctoress? I thought
I've heard of that. I can't remember what it is.
Yeah, so it's like, what is this? Is this something in industry, something to do with mathematics, and something that people do in industry, and they get hidden away in some business somewhere, and then they produce mathematical formulas and so on and so forth. Well, in the end, I knew from when I kind of saw some of the injustices that I was experiencing and feeling, especially at a school level, that there was something wrong with society that I wanted to correct. And so I always then had an aspiration to tackle injustice and inequality. And so there were lots of things going on in Leicester during the time that I was growing up, not least racism, but also discrimination. I witnessed the Imperial Typewriters factory and South Asian women going out on strike, defying their union, and deciding to strike regardless. As a child, these are the sorts of things that are born in my memory. I witnessed the kind of National Front marches. I witnessed the 81 uprisings, and so I had some aspirations of wanting to tackle injustice for a while, except that I didn't come from a background that was vocal. We come from a humble background, humble family. Nevis is a humble place, in the sense that the cultural upbringing that I had was to be humble, and therefore, and not to be vocal, and therefore it's kind of unheard of to be outspoken in that way. And I was being trained actually by my parents to be a support to somebody else, not to be a leader, but to be a support to somebody else. All those foundational skills was about supporting others, And so I did, have this burning desire though to tackle injustice and to save the world.
Wow. I'm going to reel you back in that, because that's a lot of information that you've given us. Thank you very much. To all my listeners out there, if you don't know what the Imperial Typewriter Building is, I'm pretty sure most of you have travelled on East Park Road in Leicester. I believe that's the building you're referring to. And it's the Imperial Building where right now you've got different manufacturers and textile businesses that are inside there. Well, that used to be the typewriter factory where the typewriters used to be manufactured there. And the owner had named that building, the typewriter was called Imperial Typewriters.
Business, yeah.
Yeah, and hence the name of that Imperial Building. Now, I know that. I actually recently learned that because I think it was last year or the year before. I was on a bike ride and I happened to stop on East Park Road to catch a coffee and whatnot. And there was a tour actually happening on East Park Road. And it was one of our Leicester history tour guides. I can't remember the name of it. And I overheard the tour guide giving an explanation. I always wonder why it was called Imperial Building. And she was giving the history about the business and where that name came from. So that's where the Imperial name comes from. So there you go, just a little bit of information. But you said that your mother always overcompensated. And, that's fine. You know your mum. I don't know her. But as an outsider looking in, as somebody who's constantly breaking stereotypes, for me, that's not overcompensation. For me, that's a parent wanted to give their child the best start in life, knowing what in the environment is like. You're a product of your environment at the end of the day. So to me, that's her going above and beyond, making sure that whatever tools and resources she's got available at that moment, she's allowing you, her children, the best opportunity at life that maybe she couldn't have.
That's right. Yeah.
So, you could call it overcompensation. That's completely fine. To me, I don't see it like that.
Yeah, I totally agree. That is exactly what I mean in the sense that she did go over and beyond to ensure that there wasn't anything that was missing, that every aspect of my day was actually utilized. Yeah. But equally, as I said, the school that I went to was such a school with such blatant racism that if, as a Caribbean child, with my Asian friends, we were always a target for the racists. And we would, whenever the snow came, we would be met at the school gates with snowballs filled with stones, and we would be targeted. And so, and the racist names just kept coming. And the days when they had shows like Conte Kinte and all of these kinds of shows, these were the names that Roots, I think it was called at the time. We were constantly targeted, and so I spent also my days trying to become a school prefect. We all tried to become a school prefect because it meant that we could be inside and not on the
inner circle.
We could be.
I was school prefect for 5 years running. I know exactly.
We don't have to be in the school playground. We don't have to face the bullies, and we can, try to survive as best we can in an environment that was hostile to us. And so these coping skills, survival skills, were skills that we also learnt as well. And it just went to the heart of the levels of injustice. When you grow up in poverty, you see that level of injustice all the time. Why are we having to, have such a poor, upbringing in this way? Why does my father, who's growing cabbage, having all he can give me on my birthday is a cabbage? This is the level of poverty that we're talking about. Why are we having fight? The Leicester market was a great place to get some good food that was inexpensive. So tripe used to be 5p. You could get a live octopus for 8p and put it in, live and put it into a bowl, and its legs would be dangling. I hated all of these types of food that people now treat as a delicacy. The chicken used to be in the backyard running around until it was ready to be killed and we would be because that was the cheapest form.
Well, it's organic, isn't it? And they were dime a dozen.
Yeah.
I mean, times have moved on. Some would say times are not as best as they used to be. I mean, I love my sweets. I'm a huge sweet tooth person. I don't share my sweets, but they're not the same. You know, you can't just go to a shop anymore and get your 1 penny sweets, your 1p sweets, and now, inflation.
Those sweet shops in Leicester,
they don't
really exist, but they were very popular.
Exactly, but there are some towns, shall I say, in the UK that they've got the ye oldie sweet shop feel and look. The prices are not the same, but when we ask for change, when we want change, then change is not just going to happen to what we want. It's going to encompass a lot more because there's a domino effect. So it's not just going to be, we say, let's get rid of poverty. In order to get rid of poverty, the money's got to come from somewhere. So, taxes get risen.
It comes from the rich. That's what you've got to tax the wealthy. That's what we need to do. We can't have inequality stretching so far where those that have and those that have not just gets wider and wider. That is not a society that we should be aiming for. And it's these sort of changes that I wanted to make, and that passion that I had for those kinds of changes meant that in school, not only was I trying to become a school prefect, but I was doing every after school activity that was going possible so that I didn't have to leave class at the same time. Finding ways to avoid the school playground and avoid the journey home with the bullies was absolutely my motivation.
But it's made you resilient.
Absolutely.
Exactly. It's given you that, what we say, thick skin for you to be able to take in a lot. And it's broken those, stereotypes as well. I mean, you mentioned typewriting, the skills. It's a bit like back in the day when I was growing up and I was in school. I'm not at all academically bright. All my skills come from me being hands-on, practical. I used to have a manufacturing business. I used to be an immigration advisor and so on. Now I'm a solicitor. But I remember because I didn't have that academic brain, those A's and B's and stars and, those type of grades, teachers used to say to me, it's fine, housewife. You'll never be more than a housewife. There's nothing wrong with being a housewife. They're a chef, they're a nurse, they're a doctor, they're a taxi driver. They do so many skills come out from being at home, taking care of your partner, your family, if they go down that route. But the irony is I've got 4 children and I was anything but. I was in college when I had my children, and then I ran my own business when I had my youngest. And in fact, I was telling a few people asking me about the birth of my youngest, who's now 15. She was born on October 18th, which was a Saturday, on her due date. I was back to work on the Monday. I was at home just that Sunday, and I was back to work on Monday. Now, some people will say, well, is she a bad mother? Some people will say, well, no, she's, good businesswoman. But at the end of the day, my daughter was fed, had a roof over her head. She was clothed. She was with me all the time. There was a balance of it, but the business still needed to be run. And nobody challenges the men when they have children. So if the man isn't going to be home, and we could go into this whole barrage of maternity and paternity, but the point that I'm getting at is I broke that stereotype there, that women can't run a business and have children. You broke that stereotype that just because you've got the skills of typewriting and pattern cutting doesn't mean you're going to end up becoming a secretary or a receptionist. You could go on to be so much more.
These are basic. These are skills actually, which are for life, and these are quality skills. My the notion of being a dressmaker, the skill that my mum had to be able to create a garment without a pattern and make it fit and make it actually designer ready and make it sustainable as well. The rights of women didn't exist in my parents' time. You did just go back to work. Effectively, my mom was running her own business, right?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
all these people that were coming to my home, all for all of these things like having their hair done and having the garment that they wanted to wear, they knew where to come. You went to to my home if you wanted the best. And that's what they did. People were just saying, this is where excellence is. And that's what my mum was producing. And she was doing it as a person who was deaf. And that is, you know, in a sense, I may not have appreciated it then, but gosh, you know, what she achieved was absolutely enormous in terms of what she produced. And I saw my mum actually rewire our house as well.
Wow.
You know, so these are things that you just got on with it. There wasn't any kind of legislation there is now that protects people or protects women, or you know that you know things have changed. We're now seeing in 1997, I think we saw the minimum wage come in. That didn't exist when my parents were, you know, bringing us up. But you know, we had unions, we had a manufacturing base, there was work in Leicester. Now we're talking about something quite different.
Absolutely. I mean, times change, but you know, it's not just about breaking those stereotypes, but it's embracing those challenges as well and making the most of what you've been given. I mean, I always say hindsight's a beautiful thing, but we're not blessed with foresight. And I'm sure that if we were to ask almost everybody that we ever come across, what would you change if you had an opportunity to speak to your 10-year-old self, your 15-year-old self, what advice would you give them? You know, I'm sure we'd give them so many. But one of the things that my brothers keep asking me, or they constantly tell me, is, do you regret? Do you regret? And a lot of the students that I mentor always asks me about my mistakes. And I always say, no matter how much things have gone wrong for me, and a lot of things have gone wrong for me in my life, but I never class that as a mistake. I don't ever think of it as that. I think of it as a learning curve, and I don't regret anything, because if I did, I wouldn't have 4 beautiful children, one of whom is standing in the corner recording us, you know, hiding away. So I wouldn't have that, you know, and I don't think of anything as a mistake. It's taught me who I am. I've learnt who I am. I've learnt to love myself. It's taken a very long time for me to get in this position in my life where I not only do I love myself, but I love everything that happens to me, no matter how bad it is. I mean, I'm a divorcee twice over. I'm going through it. Well, I've had just a second divorce very recently. And, you know, people give me that look, oh, I'm really sorry. And I'm like, well, don't be. I'm divorced. And I smile, you know, because if I'm not, then I'm crying. And if I'm crying, then I'm regretting. And if I'm regretting, then I pull into question everything that I did. Now, don't get me wrong. When it happened, it was very upsetting. I did cry. You know, I had support from friends and family and so on. But you embrace that and you move on. So moving on to the next bit. Now, this information, I recently came into this and I absolutely love this. And if you don't mind, I would like to ask you a few questions. I understand that you have reverted to Islam. Is that okay for us to touch as a topic?
I don't know where you've got that from.
No?
That is not information that I'm aware of. So
okay.
I don't know where that research has come from.
Well, I did try to look for this because I couldn't find it anywhere, and I was a bit shocked. But I did then wonder, I
think what you'll find is there are a lot of online trolls and a lot of misinformation out there in the media. And what I think people generally don't understand is when you are speaking up on issues that matter to the Muslim community, that actually you're doing it from a place of humanity.
Okay.
And, you know, I speak out a lot on Islamophobia and injustice, and what I've witnessed, and so I, you know, in a sense, I've witnessed that the growth of Islamophobia, and I've witnessed how people are being treated, and I've witnessed, you know, what's happening in other places in the world. I don't know, this isn't a political show, but obviously I'm speaking out on issues like Gaza and Palestine, and so, you know, the online trolls will say, oh, you know, she's a spokesperson for Islam and so on and so forth. And actually, all of that is just it's not from a place of love. When they do that, they're trying to mock and demean. But actually, the reality is, what we're faced with is not with what's going on in Palestine, it's not a religious war. It's actually a war against humanity.
Well, I am going to stop you on that bit because, like you mentioned, this show is it is not that political show. But I'm really glad that we were able to clarify that, because at least, the audience, the listeners and the viewers heard it here first, that when Cluadia does speak up about Islamophobia, which is a very, very real situation, it comes from a place of humanity, which we would all expect anyone who's got that decent human thread in them would do, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you've reverted into that religion. So I'm really glad that you were able to clarify that and clear that up. Now, before I go on to the next question, I just want to remind everyone that you're tuned into Ramadan Radio, Ramadan FM 87.7, DAM 9B, with your host Zainab and her show Breaking Stereotypes, and we have Cluadia Webbe today as our guest. If you do wish to call in or text or WhatsApp, the line is 0116 4822086 and 077 488 55055. Brilliant. Just a little reminder for those who might want to send any messages or anything in. Okay, so you're an MP now, right? What I would like is to talk about the challenges into that career, because there's a lot of people that I know who want to get into politics, who want to talk, want to be part of that change. So I want to just discuss the challenges that you faced as a as a woman of color. So you got the female, you got the ethnicity in there. How difficult was it for you to go into politics?
Well, it's clearly not easy being a black female member of parliament. I became a member of parliament in 2019. I'm in the oldest parliament in the world, actually. It's a parliament where all, some of those historic laws that were made. And it took a long time for women to become parliamentarians, let alone black women. In my seat of Leicester East, I'm the first woman a member of parliament. So, imagine, we're talking about over 100 years, and I'm the first female member of parliament for Leicester East. And I remain the only woman of colour for Leicester and Leicestershire as a member of parliament. These are breaking stereotypes.
Absolutely.
And also
shattering
to be,
glass ceilings.
Yeah, and also to be Leicester-born member of parliament. I believe I'm the first Leicester-born member of parliament for a Leicester seat, which is again something unheard of, because I didn't go to public school. I didn't go to the fee-paying schools. I didn't go to the places where the old boys networks operate. I went from a school here in Leicester, and I've become a member of parliament, which means that it is possible for people from Leicester to be able to become decision makers too, and be able to engage in politics and to be in the House of Commons. This is me breaking those ceilings and breaking those stereotypes, finding a route in for the people of Leicester to be able to move forward and represent the place from which they come. And that's what I've done in that sense. And people have always want to, the haters will always hate that, because of course you're stepping into their club. It's a club that they've had for some time. A bit like we've heard recently in the news about the Garrick Club, haven't we? About this club that's an all men's club, and the top professions, people from the top professions, only men, are able to go to this Garrick Club. And we've seen the criticisms of that, judges, all these big decision makers that are clubbing together, spinning off each other and making decisions in society. Well, we're trying to break that stereotype. Just my very presence as a member of parliament for Leicester East breaks that stereotype, and it actually says to women in particular that it is entirely possible for women to come forward and be decision makers and break into the places where decisions are made that affect our lives. These are our lives, and actually it's very important. So the challenge has been has not been easy. And obviously, Parliament wasn't set up in the first place for women. You know, they used to have sit-ins all night. And you know, when I first entered Parliament in 2019, they were trying, you know, Boris Johnson was Prime Minister at the time, if you recall, and he was trying to make sure that Brexit happens. And you know, we had some late sit-ins as well. It didn't go all night, but we had some late sit-ins to get Brexit through as far as they were concerned. But you know, it's not easy being a female member of Parliament. You do have to, you know, you do to some extent give up a part of your life, and therefore you have to have a supportive network around you. I think that's probably the case for all parliamentarians, but as long as that is possible, then we break barriers every single day.
Well, you're paving the way for the next generation, the next person, the next female of colour who want to come in. And I was in House of Lords last year. I was invited to a private event there, and I met quite. There was a few.
The unelected Houses of Lords.
I'm not sure, but I was in Parliament, basically, the House of Lords section, and I can't remember what room I was in. But we had Baroness Varsi. She attended our event, and there were a few other ladies, baronesses, that was there with us. And I just remember that there was some votings happening on certain, I don't know, bills, as you call them. And there was a TV in the corner of every room. And as soon as the bell went off, Baroness Varsi and the few other ladies literally got up, ran, went and did their voting, and came back. And it was just, it was exhilarating to see these ladies in front of us leaving the room to go be part of what you've mentioned as decision making, you know, processes, and then coming back and then carrying on and mentoring and volunteering and doing everything. But it just shows that sometimes women have to go above and beyond. It doesn't always come easy. Now, you mentioned support. That was one of my questions. In terms of the support that you had, there's going to be a lot of family members out there who probably don't want their child, male, female, colour, non-colour, to go into politics because of the certain stigma that's attached to that career. Do you have any top tips for those family members to maybe, you know, get them thinking about how they can support their family member, you know, their child, their son, daughter that might want to go into politics? Is there anything that you can say, words of wisdom wise?
Well, the only thing I would say is that if you have that passion inside of you as an individual, you can't break that passion. You have to let your child, your son, your daughter, you know, just embrace the passion that they have. They are pursuing a cause that they believe in. And when you have that inside of you, you feel unfulfilled unless you're able to go and pursue that passion that you want to seemingly correct. The whole thing about going into politics is that you want to try and make a difference, and you want to try and bring about change. And of course, there were people that go into politics sometimes for the wrong reasons. And you know, there's a saying that goes, you know, there's some people in politics who are like weather vanes, i.e. they swing with the wind. The wind moves left, the wind moves right, the wind swings around, and they swing with either. They have no identity or politics.
Sitting on the fence.
Or they sit on the fence. They're not very clear about what it is that they're doing. They're pursuing status and a career. They're not pursuing the just cause of an argument or a position that they believe in. Politics is about things that you believe in. And that's why, you know, you spoke about the House of Lords. There are a lot of issues about the House of Lords because it's unelected people who are appointed into positions. Of course, it's nice to be appointed as long as you can be in the right circles to be appointed. But in the House of Commons, which is where I am, you're basically believing in a cause. Whether that's, you know, to the left or to the right or down the middle or whichever, you believe in that cause, you passionately believe in it, and you're pursuing it to a degree to make change happen. And when you have that inside you, As a parent, it's very hard to try to change your child to a different direction because they have this inner burning desire and passion that they want to pursue. It doesn't come to everybody, but if it comes to your child, let them pursue it. Let them pursue their passion. Let them find the best route in order to effect change. It doesn't always have to be in Parliament that change is effected. But let them pursue the passion and the burning desire that they have within them. My obviously, you heard where my passion comes from, and it's not everybody's going to come from the experiences that I come from. People come from different experiences, and they will have different motivations for being in Parliament. Some people are just well connected, and they have that kind of like network of support that tells them to go and pursue this particular path and this particular career, because we've had generations of family that do this. Well, I've not come from that. I'm a working class person. I've come from the working class. I'm black, I'm female. I've got this innate passion, and no matter what I'm indicating, no matter what my parents had in terms of their ideals for me and their ideas for me, in the end, you will pursue what you want to pursue based on the passion that you have. You have to have passion to be in politics in the first place. When that bell rings to go and vote, and you want to vote, our offices and my offices is like it's precisely 8 minutes away. You have to be there within 8 minutes. Your office is within walking distance. You walk and you vote. You come back and you continue with business. That's how it works.
So basically, you forget the school rule where they say walk, not run. You run and not walk, because ultimately you've worked hard to get to where you are. You've had your fair share of challenges. You've had your fair share of breaking those stereotypes, and you've earned your seat at the table. I discussed this in one of my recent shows. My auntie was asking me, one of my friends was asking me, I've recently been nominated for an award, and I don't believe I'm going to be shortlisting. Shortlisting is this week.
Sure.
I don't believe I will be. The caliber of nominations are quite high. I find it quite difficult to put my... I could talk about myself. I could talk for England, but writing about myself I find quite difficult. And she asked me, do I believe it's imposter syndrome? And I don't believe it is. I believe I deserve a seat at the table. I've worked hard, just like you have. You deserve that seat at that table. You worked hard for it. You've paved that way, especially for others to come. So we have about two minutes on the clock, so we don't have that much time. But you've given a really good top tip for people who want to support their people. Do you have anything that you want to talk about in terms of top tips for people who actually want to become MPs and be that effective change for their constituents?
Well, look, what I would say to anybody, that be clear about why you're going into a profession in the first place. If you want to go into politics, be clear about why you're going into politics. There's no point in going in for the wrong reasons. Going into politics for status is the wrong reason. Going into politics for career is the wrong reason. This is not a career. This is a absolute passion. I'm working 7 days a week. This is the reality of the work. There are people that need to be supported and assisted and helped. And you can make a valuable difference to communities, to individuals, to society as a whole. Our work is not just local, it's national and it's international. And so it's a roller coaster, and there are ready, as much as you are ready to deliver, there are people ready to bring you back down and hold you back. And they're, just watch out for the arrows in the back, because they're aiming straight at you. Be ready.
Absolutely. Well, I just want to say thank you very much, Cluadia. It's been absolutely wonderful having you here on Ramadan Radio 87.7 FM with your host, presenter Zainab Zaeem, and Breaking Stereotypes. Cluadia has worked hard to get to where she is. She's broken those stereotypes. She's faced all of her challenges. She's paved the way for the next generation, young or old, male or female, colour or non-colour. And it's now up to us to make sure that her efforts go well founded. So Jazakallah khair, and until next